What is the difference of being a local teacher or a traveling teacher? And what are the pros and cons of each? Well, let's find out. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of ZoukNerds. And in this episode, we will start our season recap where we're going to be talking about all of the interviews, the guests, and the topics that we have discussed in this season. So, let's go. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of ZoukNerds. So we've had 4 episodes and 2 guests per episode. And today we're going to be talking about the things that really connected with us the most and the things that we feel that we would like to talk about again and dissect a little more and express our opinion a little more. And today, of course, we have our co-hosts joining us here. We have Gui Prada.
Hello, everybody.
And where are you today, Gui?
I'm still in Brazil. I'm in São Paulo.
Oh, São Paulo, you're near my hometown.
São Paulo.
Then.
Yes, I was actually there. I visited São José dos Campos.
Oh, you did?
And it's absolutely nothing like I imagined. It's way better. I would totally live there. Super nice.
I love my
really
city.
Nice.
São José dos Campos is actually one of the strongest economies in Brazil, even though it's in the countryside because of the high tech and schools and everything. You know, what's
such
can I
a
say?
cool
Of course,
place.
I love my town.
It.
And how about our next co-host, Adayl Iost? Hello.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
Well, where are you now?
Right now, I'm in Portland, Oregon.
And how is Portland? What are you up to there?
Portland is fantastic. One of the best things here is that the weather is just like Brazil, which I love. Like it rains out of nowhere, which is fantastic. But it's not as hot as Brazil, which is great. And a lot of greens and everything. And I'm here now for the summer to do a residence here. I'm going to be teaching here in Portland with Devlin for 2 months at least. And here we are.
Awesome. So let's start recapping everything that happened in this season 4 of our ZoukNerds podcast. Well, I do have a first one, if I may. I want to bring it back to Pedro and Cibele. No surprise.
Yes.
My people, the people from my hometown, São José dos Campos as well. There was a topic that to me really resonated and I felt really deep in my little heart, which is something that I feel most teachers have gone through in their journey from local to global, which is the local teacher recognition. I'm not sure if you remember, guys, but they did mention to us that when they were growing and they started traveling and getting recognition around Brazil, they would come back to their hometown and feel like that same recognition that they get elsewhere was not in their hometown. You know, in Portuguese, in Brazil, we say, santo de casa não faz milagre, which kind of translates to your local saint makes no miracles, which is, of course, not true, you know, but as teachers, we're not saints, but we still can do a lot of things to help the local community. But then it wasn't until they traveled internationally and they came back to Brazil, to their hometown, that people started speaking to them in a different way and actually crediting them and saying, wow, so you guys are very serious about this. So you guys are really good. And it's so twisted because why do the local people need external recognition before they can recognize their own artists for what they're worth? So let's bring this to the table. What do you guys feel about this? And have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, I was talking to Sarah about it actually. So Sara Araújo, she's an amazing dancer. That's all the things, Zouk, Tango. And she lives in São José dos Campos. And I was there talking to her about this whole bringing up the Zouk scene in São José dos Campos. And she was telling me that there is a difficulty overall to do that over there for some reason. So there might be something related to the locations that make harder, more difficult or not to bring up a Zouk scene. And you add to that difficulty the fact that I think people have the tendency of only see the value on something or someone after that thing is valued by someone else, or after someone else sees the value, then the people that were with that person the whole time were like, oh, okay, so this person is indeed valuable. So it needs this external validation from abroad, from another place, to the locals to then see the value themselves. And I don't know why that happens, but I think this happens in many aspects of life, really. And in dance, we're just seeing this happening to the local instructors. It's not by coincidence that we have one popular saying, santo de casa não faz milagre, all right? Exactly for that reason, that was probably invented having absolutely nothing to do with dance. So I think it's just a pattern of behavior that is being replicated also with dancers.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's, at least for now, it's a trend on our society, especially because of the reach that we all have with internet and social media and everything. Because I think beforehand, even though that would happen a lot, I think you guys can agree that we would have much less access to outer sources. So people would rely much more on their local teachers for everything, right? And now that we have all the social media and internet and everything, I feel that people have that as an ideal. And until they get that from their local teachers, they would not recognize that value. And I think it's the same thing that happens, as Gui was saying, with all other aspects of life. You know, an influencer just says something on TikTok and now everyone is just buying it because someone else says, oh, this is great. It values a lot. And people are like, hell yeah, now I won the Stanley Cup. Or why not? So I feel it's definitely, I think, like that. And I was very curious to see, especially you guys with this big international recognition that you two have. How did you experience that, like Alisson, when you moved to Melbourne and start working there as a dance teacher, and Gui, when you left Rio and came to work in the US or something? How did that feel for you guys?
Right. I do want to say something just before answering to that question, because I do see that it may be a pattern from Brazil itself, and this could maybe extend to other developing countries. The thing that is imported or the thing that comes from outside must be better than the local brand. You know, the car that comes from Germany, from Europe, is better than the cars made in Brazil. And in Brazil, we grew up with that mentality of, oh, this is from the US, it must be better. This is from Europe, it must be better, which is not the reality. Maybe a long time ago, we didn't have the industrial and the economical and the technology to make some of the things, but nowadays it's not the case. And I do see that happening when I go to other countries around the world where people are recognizing clothing, electronics, and anything that comes from the outside. So yeah, it may not just be something to do with Brazil. In my case, when I went to Australia, I think I mentioned this before, I didn't actually go to Australia to be a dance teacher. I went there for a 2 months English course, and I was meant to go back to Brazil after that. But once I landed in Australia, I fell in love. I felt the energy, and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't care. I'm staying here because I want to be here. I did meet the people in the dance community there, and they knew I was already a dancer. I wasn't a teacher, and then I got into teaching. So yes, I did start my career in Perth, Australia, and I went through that same thing that Pedro and Sebeli was talking about, because technically speaking, Perth was my local birthplace as a professional. So for 10 years, I was traveling the world, I was going everywhere, and the recognition was growing, the respect was growing, but it wasn't anything like if I was anywhere else. But that's right. When I went to Melbourne, that changed. Because when I went to Melbourne, before moving there, I was a traveling teacher that visits Melbourne occasionally. But then when I became local, it was a huge shift because people came to my classes as if I was a visiting instructor, which is very, very interesting to see. And maybe it's going to happen with Gui when Gui comes back to DC. You know, people will gravitate to Gui now in a different mentality of like, wow, yes, Gui is not only our local teacher, but he's sort of a visiting instructor too, because of the reach that he has gained over the last year and a half. And yeah, I'm very interested to see what happens next week when you join us here in DC.
Yeah, me too. It's super similar because I started my career, I moved to the US not to teach dance, very similar to you. And then we talked about this times before. And starting the career as a local, while at the same time traveling around, I got to experience being local and being a traveling artist, all things happening at the same time. So I cannot distinguish something. I cannot distinguish a different treatment on my case because I think they're both things happening concurrently. And the content that I was bringing at the time, it seemed to me that was a content that was desired very much at the time that I was presenting it. So it was a combination of things that I think made my experience specific. The things about being a local instructor that I felt more was related to events in DC, where we would be seen as local instructors, and then we would receive the treatment of a local instructor, which is something that was brought up many times in other forums, that the local instructor, because they're locals, they don't get a hotel room, they don't get the meals, they don't get several of these things because you're local. So in the aspect of events, yes, we felt the things that happen to the local, that tend to happen to the local. In regards to how the students treat us, how the students treat me, I did not feel a difference. I felt mostly when I told everybody that I was going to leave for a year. When I said people that I was going to leave for a year, people were like, oh my God. And
I was going to bring that up.
People that were taking classes from us for like 4 years, they suddenly decided to do 30 hours of privates. And in all these 4 years, they done very little, like one. So I think there is this scarcity mentality works in this way as well. When we see that our local instructor that is actually a traveling instructor is right here the whole time, but is about not to be here. There is all the balance of all these elements.
Yeah, and something else that I think is unfortunately present in our community, not in just our, because to be honest, I've seen this in pretty much every community, is the fact that local events a lot of the times don't give the value to local teachers. And to me, it's very hurtful. I'm going to use this word, and I think it's the correct level of pain. It's hurtful because when we look at District Zouk, for example, District Zouk is the birthplace of the dance community in DC. And then when the main instructors, whether they're local or international local instructors, don't get recognition at an event that is made locally, that is pretty much only possible because of the work that us as local instructors have done over years and years and years, it's quite hurtful, because that event would not be possible, or any other event would not be possible if it wasn't for these local teachers. So it's something that, like, at one point in Australia, I remember that there was this artist that I probably won't share the name, but somebody who is, let's say, 3 times world champion. It's not 50, but, and this person is from a city in Australia, and the local event was hiring them as a local, not giving the hotel, not giving the things, not giving all of this. But that person was the most famous person in that dance style in the world for consecutive years. But the local events would treat them as somebody probably who started 1 year ago. And basically what that person had to do is to communicate that with the organizers. And luckily, the organizers were ready to listen and ready to accommodate. And, it wasn't easy, but they worked something out. And I think that communication is something that should happen more, because a lot of the times we don't know if we are treating somebody the right way or not by their perspective. So creating that openness to communicate and to see what we can do to support them better. So then in turn, over the entire year, they can do the work to support back the event, would be something more healthy in the community.
Yeah, definitely. I think you mentioned that the events that we're talking about, and it's something that is very relevant this week with some posts on the internet that is going on. I do think, especially on the point that you touched, that I feel that the organizers need to also be open to listen to the artist experience. Because even when we try to talk to some of them, the reaction is not welcomed, for them to understand that, especially in DC, when we have Alisson and Gui and me and Elena and Ashley and all this roster of people that travels the world teaching them. And then for some organizers to offer 0 just because you live on the city, as you said, I think it's hurtful, and they expect you, for example, not my case, but in our case that we DJ and teach some events, that they expect you to close the night at 7 a.m., go back home, sleep, and be ready to teach the class at 9 a.m. without food, without accommodation, without everything, because you're the local person. You can close. Oh, you're the local person. You can do the first class of the day. It's definitely a hurtful thing to feel, as we're trying to grow our dance community. We're trying to support all the artists, support this artistry that we do. But unfortunately, it's something that I listened on a podcast a month ago. I think it also comes down to the fact that we are trying to combine art with capitalism, and those two don't go well together, because it brings a fear of not being able to make a mistake on any point of this interaction. From the artist standpoint, you need to do a perfect class all the time. You need to do a perfect show all the time. You need to be there on the social all the time, as Kaká was saying on her post this week, that there's expectation on the artists that can reflect monetary on us, especially if we're trying to live out of dance. And the organizers too, they want to put the best event they can do, and they want to put as many classes as they can. They want to put Jack and Jills. They want to put social from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. so they can offer a better monetary value to the attendees. And on the attendees also, they're paying $250 on a ticket, and I want a lineup of 35 teachers and all the best DJs in the world and everything. So it's definitely a mechanism that needs to be worked, for sure. But on the same point, as Amber posted on Facebook this week too, sometimes that logic of I cannot afford giving a meal to my local artist, but I can afford bringing this person from Russia or Europe in general. I can afford bringing them and afford everything and all the rates, but I cannot give this person a meal. It seems a little bit unfair. Just because you live in town, they expect that you have food at home, I guess.
Yeah. So everything you mentioned, Adayl, I think it's worthy of a season all for itself. We three here, we are in a very interesting position because we are at the same time organizer, local, and traveling instructors. We exercise all three roles. I have been organizing, I've been the Zouk director for Interfusion for like 3 years, being on the organizing side, helping with District Zouk. Alisson organized 75 Brazukis around the world and the moon. And Adayl is joining forces now, traveling around, and Adayl DJs on top of everything.
And he
So I
also
think
helps me with Brazuki, with the 75 Brazukis.
in
Full
the
time.
moon. Yeah. So we are in this very interesting position of being able to talk about these things from, I think, all perspectives, which allows us to give, I think, very valuable knowledge for us and for those who are listening as well. So I think we can dedicate this whole thing to an episode or to a season just to talk about this stuff. Because I think it's intense, the amount of elements involved in this math that we are trying to make, that's not going to close. It's not going to close because we don't have enough students to support the amount of events that are wanting to be offered and the amount of professionals that want to work. You know, I've been talking to the organizers in Asia mostly, and they tell me that they receive on a constant basis messages of professionals that want to work and they want to know if there's a free weekend for them to go. And there's basically no more free weekends. So you have many people want to work, rightfully wanting to work. However, the scenes still don't have enough people to support the amount that people want to offer, which brings us back to the idea of the local teacher creating that, how Alisson was talking about, creating the local community that is able to support events. And one of the things that got my attention the most in these interviews that we did was the fact that, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but I realized later on that everybody we interviewed used to teach regularly locally. It was not something that I realized, especially with Pedro and Ana, for example, that they went from locally in Rio to locally in Toronto, Canada. And their mindset, the mentality that they bring about partner dancing, about the culture of partner dancing, is very much aligned with everybody that we talked about, that we talked to, that we heard. I think because it's shaped by seeing people progress on a daily basis, seeing people's progression over time. So looking at that and seeing that shapes the way you see dance. And for me, and I think for us too, was amazing to see they in their 23-year-old, 22-year-old glory, talking about profound topics, a level of wisdom that I don't know if they were wise and applied the wisdom to the craft or the craft brought them wisdom. Like teaching locally and seeing what they were seeing brought them an awareness that they didn't have before, or a mix of both. So I think that was like a very interesting aspect of the interviews that we had, that everybody at some point was teaching locally and still is. Like Fernand and Olga, who still have a very full schedule of classes every week, and Pedro and Ana that have their classes in Toronto working locally.
Yeah, even though those are traveling teachers, they did mention that they still have their regular classes in Brazil or in Germany, in Canada, and Leandro and Nayara also in Miami. So they are local teachers who travel, which is very much what we do. Maybe we had a bias on choosing those guests because of that. I don't know. We didn't actually plan. But that's a very
Yeah, I
good.
didn't realize. I didn't realize until we started talking to them and realizing, oh, everybody is a local teacher or was at some point.
Yes, yes. And going back to Pedro and Ana, wow, that interview to me was something quite special because the way they value the culture almost as equal or more than the dance was so beautiful to see. Because let's be very honest, they're highly talented dancers. They didn't need to bring that. They could just dance and people would be mesmerized. But to be amazing, talented dancers, hard-working professionals, and connected to the culture and the history and how the community and how, as an artist, they can affect the community positively and bring people closer to not only the dance, but also how things are in Brazil in a cultural way. I think that was very beautiful because a lot of the times teachers from any dance style will just throw that sentence because this is how we do it, insert country name. Because this is how it is, insert country name. Deal with it because this is how we do it back in, insert country name. But their approach is very different. It's very much educational instead of telling people that they are wrong. So to me, that was very, very beautiful to see. And so impressive because, I mean, like we keep talking about their age, and maybe that's not the right thing to do, but I was not in that level at their age. So it inspires me that they are so beautiful and so intelligent, talented, hardworking, and knowledgeable. It gives me really big hopes for the communities in the future that they're going to help raise not just the local Canadian and Toronto community, but also communities that will be very lucky to have them as mentors and visitors.
No, yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think it's, as Gui was saying, the selection that we might have been unconsciously biased when we select all of them. Hearing all of these different perspectives from all of them on how they see not only the dance for the dance, but all the aspects that involves the dance a lot and what they can bring to these other cultures, these other countries that they're living, as Pedro and Ana were mentioned, trying to bring that, not necessarily as Alisson was saying, just the phrase, that's how we do in Brazil, but bringing that cultural aspect, especially from all the hardships that both of them have gone in Rio, which for the foreigners is the most beautiful city in the world. But we all know how Rio de Janeiro is when you're a local. And I think it's such a beautiful story to relive, and luckily we have recorded and we have available to listen whenever we can, to see how they came through all their hardships and not hide that fact at all. To bring those hardships to the table and put that on their dance, on their teaching style, on everything that they're bringing to the table. I think that's incredible, for sure.
Yeah.
Something that I want to ask you in terms of what Pedro and Ana mentioned about being bolsista and how that really shaped their approach to the community and their approach to teaching. How was that experience for you in Brazil, especially because you're also from Rio, in that community, to be a bolsista? Did you feel some sort of responsibility in that moment, or did you only realize that much later?
Later. I think being a bolsista in Rio specifically, it was an experience that today I realized was incredibly valuable for me today, the local teacher, the regular class teacher. Because being a bolsista in Rio, it was being inside of a system that was working and then relied on the bolsista for the whole thing to run well. The Rio de Janeiro used to have the culture of the big schools. So we have Alex Carvalho, Renata Peçanha, Jaime Rocha, and then we have all these other schools. They're not very known in the Zouk world because they were not focused on Zouk, but there was these other schools and they all had a bolsista system somehow. So Rio relied on them, relied on these boys and girls that wanted to give their time in exchange for learning how to dance for free. Yeah, so learn how to dance for free and then you dance with the students. And being a bolsista puts you directly in contact with the regular person that is coming out of their work to come to learn how to dance, not because they want to be incredibly proficient at it, but for all these other reasons. Yeah, and mostly it's for community, it's for connection, it's for physical contact. So I think Pedro and Ana brought an aspect of the culture that is not related necessarily to how we move our hips, how we move our shoulders. Is aspect of the culture not necessarily related to movements. It's an aspect of the culture related to partner dancing overall and how it is in Brazil as a social gathering that embraces people from different ages and different walks of life. I think that's the most beautiful aspect of the culture that I see, that they understand and that they bring and that they're going to be spreading. Because that's still silent work. That's still work that we cannot see on social media because it's a work that works slowly over time. Only when you get there, when you go to Toronto and then you see and you dance with them and then you see the work. So I think it's the unfair thing of the local teacher because the local teacher doesn't get to be filmed for the demos. The local teacher doesn't get to be tagged on Instagram. The local teacher is doing a slow work of infantry with the students. And I think Pedro and Ana bring this idea of the culture of inclusivity of those who are seeking dance. I went to a forró social in São Paulo the last time I came. And in this forró social, I was reminded of several things that I had forgotten. I was reminded that a social dance party doesn't need to be dark. It can be a little bit more, there can be a little bit more lights in it. We can see people's faces a little bit more.
That's scary.
But I forgot. I was like, oh, so yes, parties can be a little more lit. I could see that there were more people of different ages there and there were more rotation on the floor. People were dancing with each other more. So this is a good reminder to have because I think when we are in the Zouk bubble for too long, we might forget about these aspects of the culture of social dancing that comes from Brazil.
Just a quick follow-up question that brewed in my mind while you were talking, but a commentary first. That I think it's really funny, as you said, Gui, that we have this culture of dancing in the dark and everything. That I see some places that do a day social, but then they close all the windows to be dark inside. And I'm like, what's even the point of a day social then? Just because it's 2 p.m.? We want to enjoy this beautiful day like we have in Brazil. Sometimes we have like what we call the domingueiras, right? The Sunday afternoon that we just go dance and it's like fantastic on the sun and super light and everyone is just having fun. I think that's something that we might be able to bring to other cultures too. But just a quick follow-up question on the bolsista thing that we mentioned, because that's very intrinsic on our Brazilian culture. It's something that we're very used to. Do you guys think that there is a way that this can be implemented on these other local scenes that are not Brazil? And if bolsistas have a space on this day and age that we're living?
Oh, dear. Where do we start?
I
we have so
simple
much
answer to that. I have the simple one. I have this simple summarized response that I can give. No.
Okay.
I
No,
don't think so.
but-
It's not even working in Brazil anymore. Many
That's
of
true.
the schools abolished the bolsista system. you know? And
Yes.
I think it's mainly related to when the bolsista system was working best was when the information was concentrated in the schools. So the center, the brains, the center of information was all there. And then now the information is way more spread out. So keeping someone in a school became really hard. Not only for that reason, many things changed, but that's identified as one of the reasons why having a bolsista these days is way more difficult. And I don't think it would work abroad. At least not right now. At least not the way it used to be.
Yes. I have a lot to say, but we do need to take a break. So let's take a quick break. And then once we come back on the next episode, we can talk a little bit more about this and also about the other amazing interviews that we've had. So now get up if you've been sitting down, or jump to the next episode if you've got some time, and we'll see you guys on that next one. Beijos, abraços. See you there.
Ciao, everybody.